Sarach. We're on the top of Pei Hey Amud Beis. Amar Rabbi Barava, Boy Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan asked a question, which is really the question that Ula had addressed on the previous summit. Right? Ula said, if someone brought a murim of kachim kalim onto the mizbeach before zrika, which you're not supposed to do, you're supposed to first do zrika. If he did so, lo yardu, because it's not salach b'sham mizbeach. I'm sorry?
Still got the wrong one.
You got the wrong Gemara?
That's okay.
Oh, okay. Should have a different. Find you Gemara. Wait a minute. It's disgusting. Yeah. I regret that we're in such a rush that I've not really been able to learn with you at night. I think, Vaita, this whole concept of Im Allah Yardu and Nasalach Mashal Mizbeach it's a new concept. It's not. I don't think it's so hard. It's just it's fremd. It's new.
Yeah.
So it would be the type of thing that extra repetitions would be beneficial. Okay. So on Pei Hey Amud Beis. So we had said before that Ula says that Imure Kachar Kalim that were brought up before the Zrikas Dam, it gets a din of Lach Mishal Mizbeach and Allah Yardu. So he asked the same question. Imure Kachim Kalim, Kachar Kachim, as we know, Kachar Kachim are Kodesh even before Zrikas Dam. They are Kodesh from the time they were Hukdash, and as soon as you shech them, they already have a din Mi'ilo, and they're going to be Kodesh. The Kachim Kalim that only starts after Zrika. So the question is, do they still get the din of Nasa Lach Mishal Mizbeach by Kachim Kalim before Zrikas Dam? So by Rabbi Yochanan, Mur Kachim Kalim Shalom Lefnei Zrikas Dam Yardu, Lo Yardu. What's the din? Amalei Rabbi Ami v'Tibar Lach Mi'ila. Why are you asking this only? The question of whether it's Yardu or Lo Yardu, whether it becomes Lach Mishal Mizbeach, about whether you can bring it down. Even though this is Kaidim Zrika, and generally speaking, we know that Kachim Kalim only become Chayiv and Mi'ila after the Zrika, maybe, since we know there is a rule that once something was brought up onto the Mizbeach, it gets a din of Allah Yardu, maybe that could even supply that will make it be subject to Mi'ila. Amlei Mi'ila Kimibayali. There's very good to cover Kavalahu B'Mi'ila. I know, that's not under discussion, that's not up for debate. Certainly, it only could be mechayev and mi'ila after zrika on kachrim kalim. That rule doesn't change, even if you brought it up onto mizbeach. Ki kamibayla yerida. The only question was, does it get a din that if it's in Allah yardu, even though it's before zrika? Upashat lo yardu. And I said, in the end, Rabbi Yochanan came to the same conclusion as Ula, that kachrim kalim lefnei zrikas dam. If you brought it up, it gets a din of Yardu, does become now Lachav Mizbeach for that purpose. But on the other hand, it doesn't change the fact that it's not going to have a din Mila. Nachma Yitzchak had this discussion in a different form. He asked the question about Mila. He said, let's ask about Yurida. How do you know? You're asking about Mi'ila, shouldn't you ask about Yerida, whether it has a din if Allah Yardu? I certainly will say that it becomes Lach Mashal Mizbeach, like Ula said. My only question was about Mi'ila, Pashat Hachi, La Yardu, V'ein Bahen Mi'ila. It comes to the same conclusion that we said before, that it's Lach Mashal Mizbeach, that it's Allah Yardu, but on the other hand, it doesn't get a din Mi'ila. The Mishnah then continued and said, "Ve'elu loyayu psulon b'kodesh." We said in the Mishnah, there's an afkamina, those things that psulon b'kodesh, meaning that they became part, that their psul happens after the animal is brought to the Beis Hamikdash. then it has a din im Allah yardu. But if the psulun is not b'kodesh, then not. Rabbi Kiva said, and one of the things that psulun b'kodesh is a bal, which is not psulun b'kodesh, is a bal mum. A bal mum, before it can, it's excluded from being a carbon even before it comes into the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Kiva said, no, a bal mum is considered to be psulun b'kodesh. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, lo yechsher Rabbi Kiva ela bedukin sheba'ayin. Doesn't mean all mum. In enochanami, stama mum happens. It precludes the animal from being a carbon in the first place prior to coming to the Beis Hamikdash. He's only talking about a certain a type of mum in the eye, which is not a missing eye, but a problem with the eye. Hayluk sherem ba'ifis. Since by an oif, a dukin sheba'ayin, this kind of a minor eye blemish is not considered, it's not going to pass all the ifis. You could bring it, it's a kosher carbon entirely. Then so too, even though there's a bedukin sheba'ayin that makes this animal possible, it does passel animals, but since we find that by ifis it's kosher, it's going to have a din im Allah yerid. So the marva hu kadam hekdeshin es muma, but that's only if it was makdashit before it got this dukin sheba'ayin. But if it was from the beginning, it was puzzle, then it's taka unable to become imal yard. It's not going to be able to become lach mishom mizbeach. Or Moider Rabbi Kiva ba'olas nekeva. Rabbi Kiva would agree by oilas nekeva to kekada muma like deishadamya. A nekeva is supposed to be brought from oilas supposed to be brought from a zachar. If someone brought a nekeva, since it's considered to be, since it's going to have been something that it's mum, not a mum, it's just that it's ineligible for being an oila. Since it comes from before you were makdashet, you were never able to be makdashet, it's going to have the same din like a mum of dukat sheba'ayin, that if it was before the hektish, that it's going to make it that it's not going to be im Allah lo yerid. Boy Rev Yirmiyah. Yesh nirba ba'ifas, ein nirba ba'ifas. He asked the following question. We say that a revei of a nirva by an animal, it's excluded from being a kosher carbon. Its psulai is not ba'kodesh, and therefore it's im alu yardu. What about by ifas? Now the question by ifas is only legabi a nirva. A bird isn't physically not capable of being revei a human being, but a human being can be reveya oif physically. But the question is that reveya considered a din? Does it make the bird into a nirva? The Torah says a reveya of a nirva is possible for kedusha, for carbon. We learn out from an behema, which is coming to be mitzvah or something that's a reveya of a nirva. So do we say, since we learn out from an behema, by a behema there's both reveya and nirva. Since it's only shaykh to nirva but not to reveya, maybe it's excluded. Do you say no? It's the avera that's the psol, and since it was nirva, it becomes possible. Amarabba Toshma, I'll bring you right. Rabbi Kiva machshir b'bali mumen. Rabbi Kiva is machshir bali mumen. What was the reason why Rabbi Kiva was machshir bali mumen, meaning a dukim sheba'ayin? Because he said since it's kosher by ifis, v'im isa. If you say that a nirva, revei of a nirva is not shaykh to ifis, because since there's no revei, there's also no nirva. Nachshanami ben nirva. He should also say a if that's nirva is also going to be we should say by a animal that became a nirva after it was brought into the Beis Hamikdash should also be have a din of him Allah yardu, just like he said dukan sheba'ayin, since it's kosher by a knife, it has a din of him Allah yardu. Let's say a nirva by a behem also, since by an oif it's kosher, it should have a din of him Allah yardu. Chayav a kosher b'oifus. So shema mina. So you see from here, it must be that a nirva by a oif must be that it is going to be possible for a carbon. If someone does malika on any of these things of a nirva, or it doesn't say reveh because it's not possible, or muksa that was satisfied for avodah zarah, never that was brought for avodah zarah, estan, it was given a behemoth that came in exchange for a ma'aseh znos, so mechir that was exchanged for a dog, v'tumtum v'androginus, kulam mitame begadim ha'beis habli. All of them, if you do malika, the malika is invalid since they're not shaykh to hakrava, so they're also going to be mitama begadim ha'beis habli. So you see that we include nirva, that is mitama begadim ha'beis habli. But says it must be possible for as a carbon. Shramina.
What does it mean? Begadim ha'beis habli means when you swallow, huh?
Right. So the tuma, this is talking about tuma. The tuma of nevela by a bird is different than the tuma of nevela of an animal. Tuma of nevela of an animal comes if you touch the nevela, but a bird only you become tame only when you swallow the bird. That's what we call it, metama bebeis sabliya, when you in the throat.
And begadim.
So metama begadim is a reference to the fact that the tuma that comes off once you become tame, if a person becomes tame from eating the nevela of a oif, it's different in two ways. First of all, how you become tame, which you said beis abliya, and also what it is metama. It's metama your begadim as opposed to a regular nevela when you become tame, you yourself become tame. Over here by a nevelas oif tar, it's metama your begadim.
By touching the begadim.
When the begadim that you're wearing become tame.
When
you swallow, yeah.
But just if it touches begadim, the begadim are not tame.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't remember the details of exactly how it works. I just know it's different from the tuma that you have from a regular nevela and how you're metama begadim as opposed to metama yourself becoming tame. I think. I don't remember exactly how it works. Amarula. I'm sorry, I skipped. Rechanina Skana Kainim said like Rabbi Akiva that I'm sorry, not like Rabbi Akiva. He said that a balmum they would take off the mizbech. My kamashmalan. Anybody say ma'isa kamashmalan? Either he's coming to say that he's paskening the halacha, not just saying the halacha, but he's saying a ma'isa. My doicha kol achar yad. Even though they would take off balei mumin from the mizbech, he wouldn't say Allah yardu. They would be yarded, but he said they would do it quietly because it did have some level of kedusha, and therefore one should be discreet about it. So the Mishnah continued. We said kashem shem Allah yardu. Just like if these things that we said that they have a din that they're kachim mizbech, if they brought up on the mizbech, they don't come down. So too, if they went down, they don't come up. You don't bring them back up. That which we say that if it's yardu, you don't bring it back up. That's only if the fire. It means if you brought it on. Let's say you brought some puzzle or carb, something that's puzzle. Let's say a basar that has din pigel, so it has a dinim alula yardu. We say if it falls off, you bring it back. You don't bring it back up. That's only if you brought it onto mizbech, but you haven't yet taken the emur and put it on the fire. Well, once you put it, it's part of the fire, and you could still somehow figure out. Oh, I remember this is the piece that originally came up onto the mizbech. It was pigel, and it wasn't supposed to be on the mizbech, but it had a din of alula yardu. But if it has already that the fire partially burnt it, then the taka gets in of lachem mizbech, and it's like we said before, poikin. If it falls off from the fire, it goes back up. So it's going to have that same thing. And yalu. If the mashal ben ha'ar, then you have to put it back on. Rameri masniya reisha. Rameri learns it the way we just said, that it's going on our Mishnah that said im alula yardu. That he said that we said, but if yardu la yalu, but mashal ben ha'ar, he said is an exclusion. Chanina misura masniya seifa. He learns it on this next Mishnah that we're about to learn in another 2 minutes, where we say the bones and the sinews and the horns and the hooves, these are all parts of the carbon that we're going to see. Yalu, partial yalu. These things are not really supposed to be burnt together with an oila. An oila, you burn the whole animal. The din is you're supposed to really separate these parts and not burn it together. But if you didn't separate it and you brought it up on the mizbech, it has a din im alu yard. So on that, he said that which we say, and if yardu la yalu, if these things were on the mizbech, that they have a din of im alu la yardu, but then you took them off, it has a din im yardu la yalu. That he's saying that's only if loy mashla bahanar. But even if the hooves and all these non-edible parts of the oila were separated, the kayan had separated them from the rest of the animal, that it doesn't have a din that you're supposed to bring it up, and it has a din im alu yardu. Even so, if it was mashal ben ar, it's still going to be yalu. Amar awula lo shanu shlei mashal ben ar, ava mashal ben ar yalu. If you say it on the seifa, these are things that are be'etzem, these non-edible parts of the oila that were separated. Be'etzem don't belong being burnt at all. So if you're going to say on that if it's mashal ben ar, you still have to bring it up if it falls off. Kol sheken aresha, certainly on the things that were supposed to be burnt, but they were psulim. So once they became they were brought onto mizbech with shem Allah yardu. So then certainly, if they fall off, and it was mashal ben ar, if they fall off, they'll be brought. But if you say it on the reisha, you'll say these things are less shaykh to the mizbech. These things are not supposed to be burnt in the first place. So therefore, we would say that even if it's mashal ben ar, maybe you wouldn't bring it up. Zok the Mishnah. Now we're going to say this thing. Ve'elu im alu yardu. These are the things. A bunch of things that if you bring them out the mizbech, they have to be brought down. And we're going to describe a bunch of parts of a carbon that are not supposed to be burnt at all, right? When you have a shlamim, for example, right? So you shech the animal, you throw the dam goes on the mizbech, and then you have leftover different parts. They have the emurim that are supposed to be burnt on the mizbech, then you have the basar that's supposed to be eaten by the owners, or by chatas and asham. The basar is supposed to be eaten by kehanim. So that basar is not shaykh to the mizbech. It's not supposed to be burnt on the mizbech at all. So basar kachim kalim, the basar that's supposed to be eaten by the bailam or by the kehanim, that is going to be in alu yardu because it was never supposed to be on the mizbech and it's not supposed to be burnt. Umoiser ha'omer, the leftover, the omer, which is also supposed to be eaten by the kehanim. Ushtei halechem, the lechem aponim, which is eaten by the kehanim. The shari minchas, a regular mincha, not a minchas chayta. That's minchas chayta goes to the kehanim. A regular mincha, shari mincha, that minchas chayta gets burnt, but a regular mincha goes to the kehanim. Faktaris is supposed to be burnt on mizbeach hapnimi. It's not supposed to be burnt on mizbeach hachitzon. So all these things have no place on the fire of the mizbeach hachitzon. So on that we say Yim Alu Yardu. If you think about it, it makes sense. Like just because you brought on the mizbech, now all of a sudden it's going to switch over from something that's supposed to be eaten to being burnt. So that's why we say these things are Yim Alu Yardu. Whatever we've been talking about, basar, things being burnt on the mizbech, that we say Yim Alu Yardu, those are things that were supposed to be burnt on the mizbech, like emurim or maybe a mincha or nesachim. Zakdumar, like the kaimitz of a mincha or the nesachim. Hatzema sheberoisei kvasim, the wool on the head of a keves, v'sa'ar shebezakein, and the hair of shebezakein tiyashim, and the hair of the face of a goat. V'atzamos v'hagidim, the bones and the sinews, v'akronim, and the horns, v'atlafim, and the hooves. So then, whether we have a v'zman shehem mechubarim, when you haven't separated them from the animal. We're talking now about an oila. So oila, the whole thing is burnt on the mizbeach. So as long as they're still attached, yalu. then im alu, it's going to be yalu, im alu lo im alu lo yard. Shenamar v'hiktar akainis akol. Pirshu, but if it was separated lo yalu. Shenamar basisa lesecha basav adam. Right, this is v'hiktar akainis akol. This is that original pasuk. V'kira karav yirchatz b'mayim v'hiktar akainis akol hamizbecha oila rishu reich michayech l'Hashem. So it says as a coil, so it sounds like including everything. But then we have another pasuk that says basisa lesecha basav adam, that it's the basar and dam that you're supposed to burn, and not the rest of it, not the inedible parts. So how do we split that? We say if it was separated, then it has a din basisa lesecha basav adam, only the basar and dam, and not everything else. But if it was all together, as long as it was not, the kohen didn't separate them, then it has a din. Victor Akainis Akoil, and then it's going to have a din im alu lo yad. Zak the Gemara. Tanraban, which is the Gemara says a brayso that says essentially the same thing. Victor Akainis Akoil hamizbecha. The kohen will bring everything on the mizbech. Rabbis atzamas v'agidim v'aknaim v'atlafim. So it's including everything, even these inedible parts that it all has a din to go on the mizbech. Yachal afilu pirshu. I might say even if you separated it, Talmud Leiba says only the bas adam. Basav adam yachal yachlitz gidim vatzamitz v'yala basal legabe mizbeach. Maybe I would think that since it says basav adam, basav adam, maybe he's mechoyev that even if he separated them, he should bring them on the mizbeach. I'm sorry. Maybe he should separate them. Even if they're still together, he's going to be mechuyev to separate them and just bring the bas on the mizbeach. So it comes to tell you from the fifth, which is what the Brayso said, what the Mishnah had said. If they're still mechubar, then he brings it up onto the mizbeach. But if they're separated, even if it's on the mizbeach, yardu. It has a din im alu yardu. Man tana's chamet le the Amar pirshu yardu. Who is this tana? Like the Mishnah and like the Brayso that says, as long as they were separated, the inedible parts of the animal of an oila have to be brought down. Rebbe, this is Rebbe, the Tanya. We have a Brayso, and the Tanakama of the Brayso is not like Rebbe, and not like the Mishnah, and not like the Brayso. We learn from Esakol. And even if they were separated, we learn out from Esakol, that tells you that everything has a din, that you bring it up and you burn it on the Mizbech. What does he do with the din of that the pasuk that says only the basar and dam is burnt on the mizbeach? It's coming to tell you only the basar has a din that if it was paka, if it burst off of the mizbeach, the fire pushed it off of the mizbeach, that you have to return it. But you're not machzer the gidim vatzamas. So he says the gidim vatzamas are really very similar to the basar. The only nafkamina is going to be that if it got pushed off the mizbeach, well, after it started getting burnt, that the gidim vatzamas don't have to come back up. Rabbi Aimer, that's Tanakam. Rabbi Aimer, kasav echad Aimer, vikter kind of sakala mizbecha riba, because that's a riboy. Kasav echad Aimer sisa lezecha basav adam miat haketzat. Rabbi says, like our mission, like the Brayso, that we're going to be mechalik, that if it's pirshu, if the inedible parts are separated from the basar, then even if they're brought up onto the mizbeach, you take them down. So the Shita changes the words of this pirshu yardu. It's not quoting the Mishnah, but that's a quote from the Mishnah. He's really quoting what Rebbe had just said, and the Brayso that said, we said Rebbe says like that. The Brayso said if it was separated yardu, it has a din that even if it went up on the mizbeach, the inedible parts have a din that they have to be taken off. Amar Rav Zera lo shanu l'sha pirshu klape mata. Rav Zera says That's only if it was separated, it was on the Mizbeach, and it got separated, the inedible parts got separated from the basar, that is a din of yardu. That's only if it was separated that it went toward the outside of the Mizbeach. Avaklape maila, but it was separated closer to the fire, it got closer to being eaten, meaning to be consumed by the fire. Even though it's separated, even though ultimately the inedible parts got separated from the edible parts from the basar, it's still going to have a din that it's lo yardu. I'm sorry. You're saying this even when it's separated. You're going to say, what difference should it make which direction the inedible parts went? Whether it went toward the fire or away from the fire, it's pirish. Rav has a pasuk that says that according to Rebbe and according to the Brisa, we're saying there's a pasuk that tells you that if it's pirshu, it has the din of yalu. Now all of a sudden you're saying it went toward the fire, therefore it's going to be a malula yardu. How did you get away from the pasuk? You're making a svara to overcome a pasuk. So Amar Rabba Hachikam. Rav was saying it different. That which we said that if it's pirshu, that it's going to be a din of as we're going to see what it's going to be. Legabi what? Ava pirshu kaidon zirka. That we're saying there were two things that happened. First of all, we're talking about kachay kachim, right? We're talking about an oila. So we're saying that pirshu is going to make it, first of all, that it's not part of the basar that has a din of that it has to be burnt. Also, after zrika, that these emurim, the oila, the whole basar and the emurim of the oila, they have a din that there's a meila on them until they're burnt up. Everything until you complete its avodah, it's considered to be, it has a din meila. So we're going to say, he wants to say, these non-inedible parts, that ba'etzem la'achaz zrika, if they were separated, they would immediately after zrika become, you'll be finished with the avodah. They become mutter for the kahanim to use however they want, and there's no din meila on them. Just like the basar, just like the skin of the oila, the Torah says directly that the leather of a oila belongs to the kahanim. So these inedible parts would also become part. That's what he's saying. I'm sorry. So he says, that which we say that they still have a din mi'ilah, that's where you separated them after zrika. If they were separated before zrika, and then they have a din that they don't go up onto the mizbeach. Once if it was separated before zrika, and then you did the zrika sadam, so there's nothing left to do with these inedible parts. They don't have a din to be burnt. They were separated. They're not supposed to be burnt on the mizbeach. So immediately with zrika become mutter for the kahanim to use, even for a handle for their knife. They could use it for the rest of their lives. There's no restrictions on it. Saval ki hada amar Rav Yochanan mishum Rav Shmuel nemar la'iyah ba'ila v'nemar la'iyah ba'asham. Where do we see this din? It says that by oila that should belong to you, that's talking about the skin. The oil belongs to the kohen. And it says also by the asham that the basar of the asham belongs to the kohen to eat. Just like by asham, the atzamais are mutter. You don't bring any of the basar of the asham on the mizbech. So atzamais are certainly going to be mutter whether you separated them or not. There's no din of bringing the basar on the mizbeach. The atzmas of the oila, even though theoretically, if it's not separated and it goes on the mizbeach, it could have a din of malula yardu, but nevertheless, the atzmais are going to be mutter with the zrika. So tomorrow mufti, and this loyia has to.
This prisha is supposed to be before zrika or is it supposed to be after zrika? For the book.
The prisha, I don't think it makes a difference, right?
So, but what happens? So, but we're saying this is only prisha. What happens if he's Parsha after Zrika? Then he can't use it?
No, he could still use it. The problem is if he's Pirish it after it's on the Mizbeach, that it already got the din of Lach Mishal Mizbeach, then maybe
Then he can't.
then you have a problem.
Even though Rebbe
But the
says
din
that
of what
you are Yoreded.
right, he says that's what he says. Lo shal shapirshul achaz zrika, pirshul koydem zrika, so zrika b'shar sinu. I feel him every night. But we said pirshu, it's yardu.
Yeah.
If it's pirshu, it's yardu. If it's not pirshu, it's not yardu. So it still has a din of meila up until the point where it's burnt up. But it's going to be an afka. The question is it an afkamina if it's kaidem zrika or la'achaz zrika? Will the bring it up on the mizbech make it awesome? Zak the Gemara. Zak the Gemara loy mufni. It must be mufni. This must be a gzeira shab mufni. You like mufni. If not, the text mufni. Sorry, mutter. If we would have a simple question, you try to bring up from Asham.
Did you skip Sabalaki Hadam Rabbi Shom Rabbi Shmuel? Oh no, you got it. No.
Yeah, mufni. So it has to be mufni. Do you like mufni? Sorry, mutter. I could ask a kasha. You can't learn out the basa. You can't learn out the Gidim Vatsamis of a oila from that of an asham, because in asham the basa is mutter, so therefore it makes sense that the Gidim Vatsamis are also mutter. So lo yeh yeseruk sif enachanami. There is an extra lo yeh in the parsha. One of them is extra. It doesn't have to say lo yeh because it is his anyway. The Torah said that the asham belongs to the kohen. What does it have to say again? Lo yeh. Masav ra'ada barahava. Atzmis kachim lifnei zrika. Moilem behen. The atzamis of kachim. He asked the question. Atzamis of kachim before zrika. Moilem behen. You could be moil behen, meaning kachim, right? Kachim kalim. There's no isser till after zrika. La'achad, because it's talking about, and this is talking about, I guess it's any kachim. La'achad zrika ein moilem behen. But after zrika, there's no meal. The shel oila, moilem behen la'oilam. But the oila, it's always moilem. So that sounds like even if before zrika, the oila, you have meila in the atzamas. But we just said that if it's pirshu lifnei zrika, that it's not going to be asa. Ema v'shel oila pirshu lifnei zrika ein moilem behen. So you'll say shel oila, if it's pirshu lifnei zrika, then there's no meila behen. La'achaz zrika moilem behen. But la'achaz zrika there still is meila because it still has it can have a meila. La'achaz zrika moilem behen la'olam. But la'achaz zrika, once it's pirshu, moilem behen la'olam. What does that mean? Moilem ba'olam. Zak Rashi. The kivin the pirshu ve'inu la b'nei haktarnenu le'ahanu l'zrika ubisrayu kaimi. Since they would accept, he says taka that if you, so it's vice dois that you're supposed to be pirship before zrika. This is Rashi saying not like what I said before to your question. He's saying since you pirish it after zrika, ve'inu la b'nei haktarnenu, and they can't be, they're not b'nei haktara, doesn't belong in le'ahanu l'zrika. The zrika doesn't help to be matir. The busrayu kaimi, they're going to remain asur la'olam. Rabbi Lazar disagrees with this vart of Rabbah, that the way he learned of Zera. The Amar Rabbi Lazar pirshul of nezrika ma'olam b'hen. If there's pirshul before zrika is ma'olam b'hen, la'achaz zrika loy nanin v'loy ma'olim. He says even la'achaz zrika, if you pirish it, it doesn't mean that it remains asur la'olam with a deraisa dika din mila, but it does get a loy nanin midrabanan. There were guys on it that it's not going to get a din of it. It's going to be asur b'hana. Okay, we're going to have to stop over here.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.